Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin Parshas Pekudei, chapter 38, verse 21. This is the last parsha that's dealing with the Mishkan, which is for good reason because this is the last parsha of the book of Shmos. So the pasuk says, "Elef Gudea Mishkan Hoidus Asher Pukad al Pi Moshe." These are the countings regarding the Mishkan. We're talking about the different donations that were made. That was commissioned, the Mishkan of testimony, that was commissioned and Moshe's word, Avodas Halviim Biyadi Samar ben Aaron HaKohen. And the tasks of the Leviim were in the hands of Isamar, the son of Aaron. And we begin to go through a review of sort of how the Mishkan was made and who did what and how much was given for this and how much was given for that. But it all starts with the basic charge of building the Mishkan. The phrasing of the Mishkan of testimony, is a very difficult phrasing when you think about it. These are the countings of the Mishkan, the Mishkan of testimony. That's what it sounds like. But don't we know what Mishkan we're talking about by now? Would we not have realized what Mishkan we were talking about by now? So it really sort of jumps out at you. It's a very interesting Rashi over here. Rashi, it's the third Rashi on the pasuk, Mishkan Eidus. Eidus li Yisrael sheviter lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu ma'aseh ha'egel. This is the ultimate testimony to the Jewish people that God forgave them for the sin of the golden calf. Sharei hishra shechina b'nei, because he brought his divine presence into their midst. So that is the ultimate proof that God has forgiven them. So it's not, there's no such thing as being just the Mishkan. The Mishkan was a great thing, but not only is it a great place of connection between God and Israel, the very existence of the Mishkan is a fundamental testimony that God has forgiven the Jewish people. That's what Rashi says. There's a very interesting sforno over here. Mishkan Idus, it's the second sforno on the pasuk, on pasuk Chav Aleph. Siper malos ze Mishkan shebishvilam hayaroi liotz nitzchi v'shelo lipol biyad oivim. It's a really interesting comment. So the sforno says, when we read in Tanakh of three special sanctuaries, I mean, there's other sort of setups in Israel, but the main ones are the Mishkan in the desert and the two temples. So the two temples were destroyed. Two temples were conquered by enemies. The Mishkan wasn't. The Mishkan they were no longer in the desert anymore, so they moved on. Why? Well, why did the Mishkan merit to have such a different essence and existence? In other words, the Sforno says this Mishkan could have been forever, theoretically speaking. It could have been forever. Why? Rishona, Shoyim Mishkan Eidus. The first reason, says the Sforno, it was the Mishkan of testimony, meaning Shahayubo Luchos Ha'edus. It had the tablets of the testimony of God in there. So what we're doing right now is we're not necessarily explaining why it wasn't destroyed, but what we're saying is there were four very special qualities about this Mishkan. And these four qualities together made it that it wouldn't be destroyed. Number one, it was the Mishkan of Eidus. It held the Luchos, the tablets from Moshe. Number two, Asher Pukad al Pi Moshe. The instructions were given by Moshe. This wasn't just some also ran. This was the great Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of the prophets. He was the one who gave the instructions for the Mishkan. Number three, Shois Avodas Halviim Biyadi Samar, Kiamna Mishmeres Kochelka Mishkan Biyadi Samar Haisa. Everything the Leviim did in their roles for the Mishkan was instructed by Isamar. So not only was the construction of the Mishkan under the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu, but the work in the Mishkan, once the Mishkan was operational, was under the leadership of a very special person, the Kohen Isamar. Number four, Betzalel ben Uri ben Chur Lamate Yuda Asa. The architect, the chief of the building, God, Scott, we have another the chief of the building project was Betzalel. Shayu Roshe Umne Meleches HaMishkan V'Kelev Miuchasim V'Tzadikim Shebedur. You know what this is, says the Sforno? all of the central people involved with the creation of the Mishkan and with the operation of the Mishkan were all pious people. And that's a great merit for things working well. And therefore the divine presence dwelled on their handiwork, and it never fell to enemies. Avo Mikdash Shlomo, Shahayu Ose Hamlacha Bo Mitzor. Shlomo Melech was great, but the temple that he built, many of the workers came from the place called Sor, weren't even Jewish. Avo Pisha Sharsu Bo Shchina Nifsadu Chalakav. Of course, the divine presence resided in the first temple. Of course it did. But some of the segments of it got worn down over time. They needed to fix things up. They needed maintenance, which we really don't see anything like that recorded in the Mishkan in the desert. And ultimately, the first temple fell to the hands of the enemies. The second Beis Hamikdash, though, really was missing these four conditions, and therefore, we know there weren't miracles in the second temple like there were in the first temple, and of course, that the second temple was still a very special place, but there wasn't the same level of divine presence there. Ki amnam ba'yisheni lo haya mishkan ha'edus, shlo hayu bo luchos edus. The second Beis Hamikdash did not have the tablets. V'lo pukad ki'im al pi Koresh. V'lo hayu sham b'nei Levi. Who was the one who commissioned the building of the second temple? Koresh. Koresh the king wasn't even from the Jews. It was very nice of him to commission the temple, but that's a far cry from Moshe Rabbeinu commissioning the temple. There weren't Levium there. We're talking about the Levium in the Mishkan were guided by Summer. There weren't even Levium in the mix for the second temple. At least, when Ezra comes on the scene, there's not Levium in the mix. When it was asking for Ezra, again, you had non-Jews dealing with the construction. So the point of this forno is this pasuk or two at the beginning of the parsha is giving a context as to what was so unique about this Mishkan. It was the Mishkan Ha'edus. It had the Luchos in it. Asher Pukad Api Moshe. That was under Moshe's instruction. Number 3, the Levium were involved, and Summer headed them up. And number 4, you had someone like Betzalel working on the construction and heading up the construction. So a very interesting sforno to just think about a little bit. What it does speak to, if you're for those looking for a takeaway, is the tremendous merit of having not only doing good things and not only having people coming together to do good things. Those are very, very important. But there are a lot of stories through the generations that when there were exceptionally good people involved in good things, that was a great merit. It was a great merit for the project to have great success. Now, listen, if we have to work with what we can get. I mean, we need great things to happen, and thank you. We need great things to happen, and whoever we can get to do great things, we should try to get them. But it's a great merit to have people of special quality. Okay, I want to at least begin the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Chavalv. It's the second Kli Yakar on Pasuk Chavalv. Mishkan Oidus. Amr Razal Shelakach Ne'amar Mishkan Shnei Pa'amim. That there's a reason why it says Mishkan twice. Lefisha Beis Hamikdash Shomata Mechuvan Keneged Beis Hamikdash Shomala. That actually the sanctuary below has some parallel role to a sanctuary in heaven. Shenemar Mechon Shivtecha Pa'alto Hashem Mechon Hainu Mechuvan Zelu Maseh. Very interesting. In Az Yashir, we say that God has created a machon. Machon seems to be related to the word of prepared. an area for your dwelling. You have prepared for your dwelling. You have designated, God. You have created. But there's an interesting pshat that it says mechon is related to mechuvan. Mechuvan means lined up. And that's an idea that we talk very much. We talk about a lot on Tishma, by the way. There's a Beis HaMikdash in heaven and a Beis HaMikdash down here, that type of thing. So there's some parallel entity in heaven. B'medrash acher amru mishkan shnei pa'amim v'shes mashkein shnei pa'amim b'avonam shel Yisrael. Okay, so there's another pshat. So one pshat, remember we had asked, why does it say Mishkan ha'etos? So one pshat from the Medrash is that there's really two Mishkans in the mix. There's the Mishkan down here, and there's a Mishkan in heaven. But then there's another pshat that there's a totally different Medrash. That the point is that this Mishkan had to be reestablished twice because of the sins of the Jewish people, meaning there had to be, different temples that had to be built and rebuilt because of the sins of the Jewish people. So that's why it says Mishkan twice. What is the connection of these midrashim to what we're actually talking about here? Why would these midrashim mix in over here? I mean, this pasuk is very much about the building of the Mishkan. One medrash has to do with the destruction of the first and second temples. One medrash is very interesting. It talks about the concept of a Mishkan in heaven. But what does that have to do with us? Why is it relevant here? How Cain Omerani? Therefore, I say Shakulam here Gishu Bekush Yezu, that the different midrashim actually were addressing a question. Lama Hichnis HaCheshbon Be'emtza Amlacha. We're not finished describing the actual work that was done yet. Why are we mixing in now, talking about how much this was donated, how much that was donated? We're not finished describing that everything was done. Why don't we first describe that everything was done, and then at the very end we'll talk about the donations. In the previous parsha, it spoke about the work for the Mishkan and all the vessels. And in this parsha, we talk about that they made the garments for the Kohanim. And why in the world does this other thing mix in? And we will leave the answer to this question for tomorrow, God willing. So we discussed the Sforno highlighting very unique aspects of the Mishkan. And the Kli Yakar cited these two interesting midrashim about the Mishkan, and we're trying to understand what the connection is here. And the Kli Yakar has left us with a question, which is, why would the pasuk talk about the donations at this juncture before finishing description of the completion of the design of the garments? I want to echo what a few people have chatted, which is it's very nice to have Mitra with us. And it's just very nice to have you with us, Mitra. You're a soft-spoken person, but every time you're physically in a room or even virtually in a room, you bring much joy to everyone there. So it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome back, Mitra.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thanks for everything.
Welcome, Mitra.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my father just points out that there's definitely ideas, we've shown him that there was a concept of divine presence in the second temple, not to the same extent as the first temple. Yeah, I think that's well said. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, Mom.
I don't know if you want to
Anyways, I just want to say, like in reading about the Parsha Vayakel, it's so connected to Pekudei, and in the book that I read on the commentary, it says, why does Hashem keep on talking about the Mishkan? He said about the construction of Mishkan in prior Parshas, and now in Yakel and then Pekudei, and it's because it's like what you said regarding Eliezer, the narrative on Eliezer being so extended. It's because when it's really important or dear to Hashem, he spends a lot of time talking about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Chana Esther?
So it's a very, well, welcome back, Mitra. But it's a very interesting thing that the Mishkan was never destroyed, but the Beis Hamikdash were. So why don't we want why don't we want the Mishkan to come back instead of the Beis Hamikdash, since in a sense it was holier?
That's very interesting. I think the Mishkan was a very temporary role in the big picture. The Mishkan was for the Jewish people in the desert until they would move on to greater things in Israel. In a sense, the Beis Hamikdash is much more about taking the temperature on our relationship with God, and what we as a nation through our history deserve and don't deserve, and will be inspired by. So I think the Mishkan was a great thing. But it was really for an isolated period in time. The Beis Hamikdash was intended to be a bias, a building that would stay. And the fact that we don't have it is obviously we're missing something terribly. And even besides missing it, it actually is indicative of a lacking in our relationship with God, which is, of course, very grave. I think that's the way to look at it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Yeah.